Welcome back to Coremates. If you're here right now, maybe with coffee in your hand or headphones in, or just needing a quiet voice in the background, we're really glad you're here. This is one of those conversations that feels less like an episode and more like something you talk about with a friend you trust. No rush, no fixing, just honesty. Today, we're talking about something many of us have felt, but haven't always had language for. That moment when something doesn't sit right, and instead of trusting that feeling, you start questioning yourself. You wonder if you're being too sensitive, too emotional, too much. This episode is called, You're Not Overreacting, Your Boundaries Were Crossed. And before we go any further, we want to say this clearly. This isn't about blame. It isn't about labeling people as bad or wrong. It's about understanding your internal signals and learning how to trust them again. So wherever you are, take a breath with us. You don't need to figure anything out right now. Just listen. Let the words land where they need to. Let's begin. You know what I've noticed? When something feels off, my instinct isn't to look outward first. It's to look inward, and not in a kind way. Like, what did I do wrong? Exactly. Or maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they didn't mean it like that. Maybe I'm just tired. We give everyone else the benefit of the doubt and give ourselves the burden of proof. And it's not random. Most of us were taught very early that harmony matters more than honesty, especially in families, schools, workplaces. Being easy, being understanding, being low maintenance. So when a boundary gets crossed, our nervous system feels it, but our mind rushes in to keep the peace. Psychology actually has language for this. Our brains are wired for attachment before self-expression. As kids, staying connected was survival. So questioning yourself becomes safer than questioning the relationship. Because if you say, that hurt, you risk tension, distance, disapproval. But if you say, it's probably nothing, everything stays calm on the outside. The cost just gets paid internally. Yeah. In the body, that tight chest. That heavy feeling in the stomach. That weird mix of irritation and shame. Your system knows something crossed a line, even if your language hasn't caught up yet. Neuroscience tells us the emotional brain reacts milliseconds before the logical one. Your body responds first. Your mind explains later. And if your mind was trained to explain away discomfort, guess what happens? You start mistrusting your own signals. Over time, it becomes automatic. You don't even notice you're doing it. So when people say, I don't trust myself, it's rarely about intuition. It's about conditioning. About years of being told, directly or indirectly, that your reactions were inconvenient. Too emotional. Too sensitive. Too intense. When really, you were just responding. Doubting yourself first doesn't mean you're weak. It means you learned how to adapt. And adaptation kept you connected. It just didn't always keep you whole. So if your first reaction is self-doubt, there's nothing wrong with you. It's a habit, not a truth. And the moment you see it as a habit, you can start changing how you relate to it. Which brings us to something really important, how your body knows a boundary was crossed, even when your mind isn't sure yet. You know, when people hear the phrase boundary violation, I think they imagine something obvious. Something loud. Something you could clearly point to and say, that was wrong. Yes, like raised voices, harsh words, or a clear moment where someone crosses a line. But in real life, especially in close relationships, it almost never looks like that. Most of the time, it's so subtle that your mind doesn't even catch it. But your body does. And that's where people get confused because the body speaks a very different language than the mind. A boundary violation in the body often feels like a shift, not a reaction. You don't explode. You don't even necessarily get upset. You just contract. You might lean back slightly. Your breath gets shallower. Your jaw tightens without you noticing. And the conversation keeps going, but you aren't fully in it anymore. Later, when you try to explain it, it's hard. Because nothing bad technically happened. No one yelled. No one insulted you directly. And that's when people say, I don't know why I feel weird about this. That weird feeling is the signal. Neuroscience tells us that your nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of safety or threat, not consciously, but automatically. This happens through a part of the brain that evolved long before language. So the body reacts before you have words. That's why the response is physical. A heaviness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, a sudden urge to disappear, agree, or change the subject. And if you grew up learning that discomfort should be ignored, minimized, or explained away, you probably learned to override those signals. Another very common response is freezing. Not dramatic freezing, just a subtle pause. Your thoughts slow down. You feel slightly foggy. You nod even though something inside you pulled back. That's the nervous system choosing safety over expression. It's saying, let's not make this bigger. What's important to understand is that this isn't weakness. It's intelligence. Your body is trying to keep you safe in the way it learned how. Especially if past experiences taught you that speaking up led to tension, withdrawal, or punishment. And this is why clarity often comes later. Hours later. Days later. When your system finally relaxes enough to process what happened. That's when you replay the conversation and think, oh, that comment wasn't okay. That joke crossed a line. That expectation didn't belong to me. The delay doesn't mean you're imagining it. It means your brain prioritized safety first, understanding second, which is actually very human. The problem isn't the body's response. The problem is when we shame ourselves for having one. When we say, I shouldn't feel this way, instead of asking, what just happened inside me? Because the body doesn't react randomly. It reacts to history, to patterns, to past moments that taught it what's safe and what's not. So when your body tightens, withdraws, or goes quiet, it's not being dramatic. It's being honest. And this is where things get tricky. Because when the signal is quiet, we start relying on something else to decide whether it counts. Intent,
Tone.
other people's explanations. Which brings us to a really important distinction, the difference between gaslighting and emotional mismatch. Because not every boundary crossing is intentional. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. You know, the more I think about it, the more I realize that sometimes our body knows something happened before our mind even has words for it. And yet, when we try to explain it later, that's where things get tricky.
Yes.
Because once you start talking, you begin to ask yourself, am I imagining this? Am I overreacting? And that doubt, it sneaks in almost automatically. Exactly. And it's confusing because the line between someone intentionally hurting you and someone just missing your cues can be so blurry. Like, some people really don't mean to dismiss you. They're not trying to manipulate or gaslight you. They just see the world differently or react based on their own patterns. Right, and that's the thing, your nervous system doesn't care about intentions. It reacts to impact. If something feels unsafe, confusing, or minimizing, your body tightens, even if the other person truly didn't mean harm. And then you're left doubting yourself. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Or maybe I misread it, even though the sensation in your body was real from the start. And that's where this mix of signals, body, mind, and intention becomes so subtle. Sometimes what happens is emotional mismatch. The other person doesn't perceive the same threat or tension that your system did.
Exactly.
They might think they're joking. They might think they're giving helpful advice. But your body, shaped by your past experiences, says, this crossed a line. And the tricky part? Gaslighting feels similar in your body at first. The same tightening, the same freeze, the same question. Am I imagining this? The difference is what happens afterward. If it's mismatch, there's curiosity. If it's gaslighting, there's dismissal. Your feelings get minimized, invalidated, or rewritten over and over, and that's when doubt becomes almost permanent. So one way to know the difference is to check in after the fact. Do you feel heard? Even a little? Or do you feel smaller, unsure, like you shouldn't have spoken at all? Yes. Your body will tell you. That sense of safety, or the lack of it, is usually very clear once you pause and notice. And the real gift here is understanding that the confusion doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're learning to read your own signals and distinguish intention from impact. which is exactly what we need before we start thinking about boundaries. Because once you can feel the line in your body and trust it, you can start deciding how to protect it without blame, without anger, without cutting people out unnecessarily. So, if we know our body is sending signals and we can start to distinguish between mismatch and gaslighting, the next step is boundaries. But here's the thing, boundaries aren't walls. They're not punishments. They're information.
Exactly.
Think of them as gentle signposts telling people, and more importantly yourself, what feels safe and what doesn't. And the most important part? Boundaries don't have to be dramatic. You don't have to make a huge declaration or write a list of rules. Sometimes it's as simple as a small adjustment in how you respond or interact.
For example,
Say your sibling makes a joke that always hits too close to home. Instead of exploding or ignoring it, you can say something like, "Hey, that topic's a little sensitive for me. Can we skip it?" Yes, short. Clear. Not accusatory. It communicates your limits without shaming them. And you'll often find they respond better than you expect. Or, with parents, maybe they constantly give unsolicited advice about your life. You might say, "I really appreciate your thoughts, but I need to make this decision on my own. I'll let you know if I want feedback." Notice how in both examples, you're not rejecting the person. You're not saying they're wrong or bad. You're simply communicating your needs. That's huge. It can feel strange at first, especially if you grew up believing you should just accommodate everyone else's comfort. Right? Your body might tighten the first few times you try it. Nervous system says, "Are we breaking rules here? Are we going to get in trouble?" But the more you practice, the more your nervous system learns, "Oh, I can exist fully and nothing catastrophic happens." And the boundaries can be flexible too. They're not set in stone. You can adjust them based on context, relationships, or your own growth. I love thinking of boundaries as a conversation with yourself first. You notice your body, acknowledge the signal, then decide how to communicate it. Exactly. It starts with internal respect. And then the external boundary naturally follows. And here's a practical tip I give people. Start with micro boundaries, like muting notifications for a bit, turning down the volume of a conversation, choosing not to engage in something draining. Yes, those small steps train your nervous system. And over time, bigger, emotionally tricky boundaries, like sensitive family dynamics, become easier to navigate. And here's the key. Boundaries don't create distance unless distance is already needed. They create clarity. They show respect, both for yourself and for the other person. Because you can love someone deeply and still protect your space. You can stay connected and still say, "This part of me needs care right now." And the more you practice, the more your body relaxes when you speak up. The freeze, the tension, it slowly melts away. You're no longer on constant alert, waiting for the next violation. That's where healing begins. Not in anger, not in cutting people off, but in knowing and showing that your inner world matters. So, after we've practiced saying what we need, honoring those micro boundaries, there's still something else that matters just as much. Healing the voice inside us that learned to doubt itself.
yes,
That little inner critic that says, "I shouldn't feel this way," or "I'm overreacting again." It's been shaped by years, sometimes decades, of family patterns. Exactly. And the tricky part is that voice can feel like truth. It's not just self-doubt, it's trained to protect you from conflict, rejection, or disapproval. Which made sense as a child, but now it can be misleading. And the body remembers this too. Even when you intellectually know a boundary is healthy, your nervous system might still tense up, your chest tightens, or your stomach knots. That's your past training speaking. So part of healing is literally retraining that voice, letting it know, "Yes, I feel this. Yes, it matters. And yes, I can respond safely." And that starts with acknowledging your feelings, not judging them. You can say to yourself, "I felt hurt when that line was crossed." That's valid, even if the other person didn't intend harm. You can also use gentle reminders rooted in science. The amygdala may trigger fear or tension, but the prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, can help you regulate the response. Naming the feeling aloud or even in your head signals safety and starts to calm the system. And stories help too. Giving yourself examples of times you've navigated boundaries successfully, even small ones, strengthens the inner voice. It says, I've handled this before, I can handle it again. Exactly. Little wins repeated over time rewire the brain. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity. Your pathways for self-trust can grow stronger, while the old, doubt-heavy circuits weaken. It's like teaching your inner voice to cheer for you instead of second-guessing everything. And the more you practice, the more confident, calm, and grounded you feel in your own skin. So the healing isn't about changing anyone else. It's about listening to yourself, your body, your feelings, your mind, and giving yourself permission to trust it. Because once that trust grows, boundaries don't feel like battles. They feel like natural extensions of self-respect, like showing up fully, without shrinking or apologizing for taking space. And that's when life starts to feel a little softer, like breathing without holding tension, like conversations being honest without fear, like being fully present, knowing you're not betraying yourself just to keep the peace. Yes, it's subtle at first, like noticing the sunlight in a room you've always sat in. You didn't expect it, but suddenly it feels safe. Your boundaries are no longer fences you have to fight for every day. They've become gentle guides, letting people know and reminding yourself what's acceptable and what's not. And you realize you can love, connect, and still protect yourself. And the inner voice. It's quieter now, not because it disappeared, but because it's no longer screaming doubt at you. It's saying, you can trust yourself. You can navigate this. You matter. And that's the most beautiful part. Life feels softer, not because family is perfect, not because tension disappears, but because you're no longer carrying the weight of self-doubt. You can show up as yourself fully. Conversations feel clearer. You speak your truth without collapsing. You listen without shrinking. You choose responses that feel aligned, rather than reactive. And your relationships shift too. Some family members may step back, not because they're bad, but because they've never learned this way of relating. Others deepen, because they see and feel the new clarity you bring. And most importantly, you start to inhabit your own life differently. Your calm becomes a signal, not a withdrawal. Your presence becomes steady, your boundaries become natural, and your inner trust grows. So if you're listening to this right now, take a second to breathe that in. You're learning a different way to relate. To yourself, to your own inner voice. And that's powerful. It's slow, it's gentle, and it's sometimes uncomfortable. But it's also one of the most loving things you can do for your future self. If this episode felt like a mirror or a breath you didn't know you needed, stay close. Share it with someone who might need it. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next conversation. We'll be here, same space, same softness. Until next time, take care of your boundaries and take care of your nervous system. It's been carrying you for a long time, and it's time to let it rest.